Hey guys, Darren Kelly, Coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome back to another episode of our Captain's video. On today's episode, we will be discussing all the players I believe you should be considering as your BC and C this week in round 21. Before we get started, I really just wanted to recap on how we did last week. So this is how I did. Ended up being 62nd overall for the round. The only thing I probably could have improved on is really moving Cherry up to number one, which I did consider, but didn't quite make the call, and then probably having a Dacos in instead of a Tom Green probably would have been the best option. But overall, did very well. Most options hit above 120. Just a few others let me down there. But yeah, still very decent there. Looking at the rankings for the weekly, wasn't too far off the top. I think the only noticeable name here is really Warney, that had a massive round. He ranked really well. Besides that, no one really ranked above me. Calvin's captains is a little bit further behind, and that's really the only ones that really featured in the top 100. So, really happy with that so far. So, with that said, let's continue on. Hopefully, we continue on with some fine form this week. So again, we'll go through all the games, discussing game by game, and then discussing all the options that you want to deal with. So starting off, we've got Friday night games, and we have a bit of an interesting one this week because we've got two Friday night games. So we got one at 6:45 and you got one at 8 o'clock. So the interesting thing with this is that you will only get to see half of the Bulldogs and Melbourne game before the West Coast and Suns game starts. So something to keep in mind if you are wanting to, VC someone in this game, that if you are then wanting to see someone in, the following game, obviously they're going to overlap. You got to make that call pretty early. You'd want a pretty decent score to lock in pretty early on. If I was going to do that, I'd probably lock in sort of an 80 plus at halftime. I think from 80 you should probably hit a 120 quite comfortably. If you say a 70, you should probably track for a decent sort of 130, but there's no guarantee on that, and they can obviously change quite quickly, and you could end up on, say 100. Like a lot of last week, we had a Merritt who was on like 70 at halftime, finished below 100, and there was someone else as well that also did very similar. I think it was a Walsh, was on the 70 and finished below 100 as well. So I'd really be searching for a big score like an 80 if you're really trying to do that. But having that said, I still think there's plenty of other options throughout the weekend, so I wouldn't be rushing it too much. Alrighty, but let's just get into it, going game by game. So we'll start with the Western Bulldogs against Melbourne. So I think Western Bulldogs are the clear ones you'd target here. I don't think we're targeting anyone from Melbourne at all. We don't really have anyone from Melbourne. You're not looking at Oliver, unless you went unique and went with a Max Gawn, but I don't think you're doing that, just given he looked a bit underdone. And yeah, was unfortunately a pretty bad trade-in from last week. So really, it's the Bulldogs or foot scrape, if you really want to call them that. Foot scrape, not scrape. Sorry. Yeah. So obviously we're looking at the likes of Bontempelli, Treloar, and Tim English, right? So not really looking at Tim English this week. I think Max Gawn's a pretty tough matchup. However, obviously he is underdone, and could put up a decent score, but I don't think it's worth considering him as a captain. He has been quite poor, and I don't think we've seen the ceiling scores from him so far this season. So yeah, not one I'm really looking there. Really looking at the true midfield boys. So Bont and Treloar. And I think we have a lot more faith in Treloar at this point in time, given that he's had a lot of success over this season. He's been absolutely killing it, and he's obviously a massive trading target this week. So I think a lot of people will be doing that VC on him. He only had an 87 last time they played early in the season in round one. So obviously that was a much different scenario where, Melbourne are actually decent at that point in time. They've obviously dropped off quite heavily since then. So he'll be much better than that, I'd say. I really like him as an option. Just listen to some of these numbers that Melbourne have let midfielders produce in the last sort of 5 or 6 games. So James Peatling, 133 last week, absolutely killed it. There was also a bunch of other scores from GWS, but I only included really James Peatling being that midfielder. You had Caleb Sarong, Andy Brayshaw, both went 120 the week prior. Jai Caldwell went 120 the week prior to that. Josh Dunkley went 158. Steele went 122, and Sam Walsh went 143. So a lot of these main midfield guys are going 120 plus. So this should theoretically be a walk-up 120 for Adam Treloar. We've also seen his ceiling, which is be above 150. So this could be anywhere from a 120 to a 160, I'd say. So he's a great option, and he heavily features in my top 5. Bont is sort of around that mark as well, but I don't think we have the consistency from Bont. He's been from the eye test, he's not really quite there for me. So I haven't featured him in this as heavily. Just because I think he plays a bit more forward than what I would like in these games. So unfortunately, I'm just going to stick with Treloar, and Bont is not really in my calculations as much. On to the next game. Really not looking at anyone from the Eagles. I don't think anyone has any Eagles, so no real point there. We're really just looking heavily at the Suns. So knowing that Eagles are a really good matchup for midfielders, we're really looking at Flanders being a really good option, and Anderson, who probably isn't getting as much talk about him as I would have thought, given his run for the end of the season, plus this really juicy matchup. So both of these guys went 110 plus like last time, with Anderson going 111 and Flanders going 112. Obviously, Flanders was in a very different role previously, but I think both of these guys go really, really well in this game. So again, listen to some of these scores against the Eagles midfielders. So you got Andy Rocha went 115 last week, Jack Steele went 130, Lockie Neal went 133, Trent Rivers went 126, and Jai Coulter went 126 against them. So again, this should be an easy sort of 120 for both of these guys, if not one of them. The thing you got to weigh up is, who do you trust more? Do you trust an Anderson who's probably more predominantly in the midfield over a Flanders? Or do you trust the Flanders ceiling that we have seen more this season? Obviously, there's been a bit of talk about Anderson's ceiling, or like his consistency. He's obviously been very up and down when they win or when they lose. I'd obviously expect them to win this game. No matter where it's played out, you have to consider that they win this game. They cannot drop this game against the Eagles. So Anderson's clearly the number one CBA taker for them there. So, but it's also really close with Flanders. He's also up there at 80 or nearly 90%. So both of these guys should go really, really well. It's just sort of flipping the coin which one you think is going to be the more consistent. I'm personally thinking I'm going with Flanders, just because I think he's shown more of that ceiling, more consistency, and I think he's got the highest ceiling, whereas Anderson, he's very hit and miss. So I think I've got Flanders over Anderson at this point in time. But both of them should be really, really great. On to the next game, the first Saturday game. Really good options in this game. Obviously, we have the likes of Sheasel and we have Sherry from North Melbourne. So Sheasel went 129 against the Tigers earlier on the season. Obviously, that was a bit of a different role where he was more of a halfbacker than what he was now. With McKercher being in, and the likes of a few others in the back line there, like a Power went back, a Stevenson's still on the side. So I don't expect him to play as much back as he has previously. So I don't mind him as an option, but however, there was Jack Graham, who has come into the Richmond side, who has traditionally been tagging players. So I'd highly expect that he's going to be tagged this week. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't, but it's North at the end of the day. To do Richmond just back in this list and say, no, we should beat these guys, and then they should jump them in the ladder. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, but I think I'd be more surprised if they do, that they don't, sorry. I expect them to tag Sheasel. So that's one of the reasons why he doesn't feature in my top 5 this week. Prior to that news, I thought he was a very good option, and from what I've seen, a lot of people are expecting him to be really, really good, but I think with just the latest news, I'm able to shift that slightly and say that he's not going to be as decent. I don't think it's worth trading him out, but he's not worth captain. The other one was Cherry. So Cherry, it's a tough one for me because obviously Nank's going to be back, so it's not as quite a juicy matchup. But Nank is still a bright green matchup for for Ruckman. So the only sort of big scores we've seen against Nank has really been Briggs's 140, which was a couple weeks ago. But I highly expect that maybe Nank needs a bit of management into this game. Obviously, coming back from the head knock, he needs to take it easy as such, not be rammed into too much. But if the likes of Briggs can take 14 tackles against Neck, imagine what Tristan Cherry can do. He absolutely loves a tackle. This could be a massive game for tackles. Yes, it's under at Marvel and not going to be affected by rain under the roof. Obviously, it's going to be good weather, or at least be dry. So, but I still think he gets lots of tackles done. I still think after that 156 last week, he can still back that up with sort of a 130. So he is a really good option for this sense. There's that. Not really looking at anyone from Richmond. Again, Taranto's, I think, a bit underdone with that knock that he received. I don't think he's out. He wasn't out in terms of the list management, so he's playing, but I don't think he's backing him in. North are a pretty tough matchup anyway, so yeah, it's not something I'd be considering. On to the Cats and the Crows. A few different options here, so we'll start with Dawson and Laird, right? So I think knowing that the Cats are the easiest matchup for midfielders, you absolutely need to look at those two, and there is a bit of a sneaky chance that Dawson goes massive in this game. So Dawson went 131 early in the season when these guys versed, so has the record, whereas Laird only went the 105. I don't think you're backing Laird in as much as you'd be backing Dawson in. Both are very quite unique anyway, so probably not worth talking about them too much. But if you do, some of the scores against the Cats have been Harry Sheezel went 118, Adam Schuller went 149, Errol Goulden went 151, Jai Coulter went 144, even a Wines went 133, and a Zach Butters went 128. So really good scores there, and should be a nice 120 return from Dawson if you were a holder. Definitely would consider putting him as captain there. On the flip side, you got Stewart, who has been, shining light of recent time in the last 5 weeks. He's gone over 120 like 3 or 4 times, so definitely needs to be considered. But there's been no real big scores against the Crows as of late. I think we had a Lockie Neal and Josh Dunkley go 140s a couple weeks prior, but we know how damaging the Brisbane are with they love to spread a lot of marks, so that really helps boost their score up a lot. And besides that, we've seen Errol Gordon and Isaac Heaney get 120s. Besides those 2 games, there have been really no big scores at all in the past sort of 5 or 6 rounds. So probably not on my high list there. The Cats have also been really bad at GMHBA. They've lost to, I think, 4 of the 7 games they've played there, and they've all been against these topper sides. So this will be an interesting one to think. I'm actually tipping the upset that the Crows get them this week. Would be awesome to see. Moving on to Collingwood and Carlton game. Again, you're not looking at Dacos. I would love to say he could, but given there's going to be 100% a tag on him with the chin cotter, I just couldn't do that. So even though he scored a 122 against them last week, there have also been no real good scores against Carlton. I think the highest score they've had against them was Shees was 134. And yeah, we know Shees was just a different breed in different roles. So I don't think Dacos quite has that same sort of thirst. So I'm just not looking at Dacos at all. Not because I don't have him, just because I don't think he's going to go well at all. On the flip side, you've got really only looking at a Walsh here. Walsh, while he has been disappointing the last sort of month, I think he does bounce back this week. He's had a 106 last time they played Collingwood, where Collingwood was actually a lot better. I expect him to bounce back quite heavily and put up a 120 score, a 110 score at least. Listen to some of the scores against Collingwood as of late. Noah Anderson went 140, Jai Coulter went 130, and Marcus Bontempelli went 159. So definitely some decent high-scoring scores there for some of the elite players. And I do expect Walsh to get that done. And I don't expect him to get any attention. So that should really free him up. He should want him to bounce back. So here's my smoky, I guess, for the week if you're looking for a bit of a different option. I don't think too many people are looking at him. The next game is a hard one. I'm personally not looking at anyone in this game. Like, obviously, there's a lot of tags from the Swans. You got Brobottom, you got Adams, you got Parker, that's also there as well. And obviously, you got James Jordan, who does any sort of tag that you're looking for. So, not really looking at any of the Port boys in Butters or Rosie. Unless you have a Houston, I probably wouldn't do that either. You'd probably get tags as well. On the flip side, I guess you probably could look at an Errol Goulden. we know he's just a different breed and he can score no matter what. But it is a tough matchup, and I don't think you're trusting it at Adelaide Oval. So he does not feature in my top 5, even though he's always a decent option, right? There's no saying you can't go for him, but I don't think the evidence shows that he's going to score well in this game. To finish off on the Sunday games, GWS and Hawthorn. Again, both pretty tough matchups. Hawthorn are the hardest to score against for mids, so Tom Green probably isn't a huge one to favour for. If you actually seen my trade out video, I'm trading Tom Green out, so probably goes to show that I don't expect him to score well at all this week. I would be expecting a sub 100 score from him. On the flip side, though, you've got Whitfield, who's obviously been elite in the last sort of 2 months. He's been the highest averaging player for the last 2 months. I did say that. But I do expect them to have a bit of a tougher time this game. There hasn't been a huge amount of scores against Hawthorn as of late, even as a defender option. I think some of the largest scores we've seen is like a Nick Vlostone, who went 114, and a Liam Duggan, who went 132. That's really the only good scores that have happened against Hawthorn in the last sort of 5 or 6 rounds. It's also at Canberra, so maybe a bit dewy, a bit colder, so maybe not as conducive to that marking style that he's used to. Maybe I'm not quite familiar with the oval dimensions, but I would expect it to be a bit smaller than what the MCG is. So maybe not as open ground that you'd sort of want Whitfield to get those free marks. And Hawthorn are notorious for running a tag on a player like that, where they are so important to their ball movement. So I wouldn't be surprised if they put a bit of attention into him and throw throw a forward onto him. So whether that's a Luke Bruce or even a Connor McDonald, one of those guys could easily sit on him and just keep him accountable. Well, the Hawks pressure is something I'd definitely be concerned about for him. So he doesn't feature in my top 5 either. No one at Hawthorn we're really considering. I don't think you're backing in Dylan Moore as a captain option, even though he is a good forward option. I just don't think he's worth captaincy. On to Essendon and Fremantle. There's a couple options here, but both aren't great. Essendon are just a rabble, and I think that they're probably going to lose this game again. So I don't expect any of them to really go any well. So you got your likes of Merritt, Caldwell, and Martin. Merritt won 109 last time. Caldwell went 69. Obviously, different role back then, and Martin went 112. I just don't think you can back any of these guys in, just given that Fremantle are a bit of a tough matchup these days. In the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, they've been real tough, where they've sort of kicked it up the knock, the pressure's on a bit more. So the midfield scores really haven't been there for against them. So I'm not really backing in anyone there to do anything amazing. On the flip side, though, you got obviously Sarong and Brayshaw, the only two I'd really be looking at. Wouldn't be looking at a Ryan or a Clark or a Young at all. Sarong went 102 last time, whereas a Brayshaw went 129. So I do really like Brayshaw as an option. Probably just outside my top 5, but that's mainly because we haven't seen too many great scores against the likes of Essendon. We've only seen, a Jack Steele 112 and a what's his name? A Trent Rivers went 126. So really not the greatest scores, but they have been decreasing and becoming a much easier opponent as of recently. So it could be a bit of a sneaky one, and I'd probably prefer to go with Brayshaw, just given his consistency and his ceiling at the moment is unmatched by Sarong. Finish off, we've got Saints and Lions, and you're really not looking at anyone from Saints. Maybe look at a Marshall, but McInerney is the second hardest matchup for Ruck, so I'm not expecting a ceiling score. It would be really something out of the box from Marshall to be able to put up a massive score from him. He only scored a 105 against him early on in the season, so nothing too major. But you're really looking at these Lion boys. You got Dunkley, Neal, and Zorko, right? So not expecting any tags in this game, given that Windhager's out. Maybe a Liam Stocker does some attention, but not 100% on that one. That was sort of a one-time thing last week, so bit of a watch there. Anyways, you're probably not trusting Neal to back him in anyway. You're really looking at Dunkley and Zorko. So Dunkley only scored an 87 last time these guys played, whereas Zorko went 125. The one thing I wanted to flag is that St Kilda, why they have traditionally been a very easy. Sorry, this is what I'll look at. traditionally have been a very easy matchup for defenders, they have been really tough recently. So if we have a designated look at these designated kickouts, look at these last scores in the last sort of 4 or 5 weeks. Since round 14, no one's really gone over 100. Only one person has gone over 100, and that was Farrell. I guess you can probably argue some of these teams aren't the most friendly. Like, you got the Eagles in there. No one really qualified. Adelaide, they didn't even put up above 50. Sydney, who's the main takeout there that they're not really scoring. At Adelaide, you'd think sort of Farrell or Houston goes big, but neither did. It's really last time was Zorko that went 125. So realistically, no one's really gone well against these guys recently. So while I thought it was going to be a great matchup, the evidence says the stats say it's not going to be such a good one. So I've not included him in my top 5, which is probably a bit different from what most people are doing this week. Dunkley, on the other hand, midfielders are pretty tough for for Saints. It's not the greatest option. It is a negative sort of points wise. So have a quick look at that. I've only seen like a Rory Ledger 133, and besides that, it's all been pretty mediocre. So you're not really going to get that ceiling that you're looking for. So I think we've rattled off a few different options there. So what's going to be my top 5 this week? So I wish I could go backwards. Can I go backwards? No, I can't. I have to go from 1. I have to go 1 down. So starting from 1, obviously looking at all these different options here, Harry Sheezel is number 1 for some reason, but for me, number 1 is Sam Flanders. I think he's been a bit unappreciated recently. We've had him all season pretty much. He's been tossed around here and there between what he's been doing recently, but I think his form has been pretty elite for what we've sort of, he's been really consistent. He put up a 137 against the Giants and 113 against the Brisbane Lions, who are really tough matchups. Before that, he even had Adelaide at 95 and a North Melbourne at 87. So 4 really tough matchups he's had in the last 4 weeks. I expect with a bit more freedom this week against an easy opponent, against the West Coast Eagles, he goes massive and can definitely put up a 140 this week, I would say. So he is my number 1 captain. Number 2, I think this is pretty stock standard, but I've gone Adam Treloar, just given that it's against Melbourne. We've seen a lot of good scores against Melbourne, as I rattled off before. This should be a walk-up 120 to a 150 for him, so he has to be included in that. Number 3, I've gone with Tristan Sherry against Nankervis there. Probably a bit underdone with that head knock. Good matchup, loves the cuddle, so I think he does very well against Nankervis there. And then I've gone number 4, a bit of a unique one. I've gone, where is he? He's not on here. Sam Walsh. I've gone Sam Walsh at number 4. I think he bounces back this week against the Pies. Pies are in a bit of shambles. They're providing plenty of points for those midfielders, so shouldn't be any tension on him. He should get an easy 110 plus. And then finally, I've gone a little bit left field again, and I've gone a... Where is he? Where am I? Am I tripping? How do I search for play? Dawson. So Jordan Dawson's back this week with playing against... Who are they playing against? God damn, I didn't play this very well. I can't see. They're playing against the Cats, right? That's right. They've got the easiest matchup for midfielders. He should be ready to go. He was frustrated last week that he couldn't play with that concussion. Said he was all good to go and could have probably played, but as the concussion, stays, you can't play. So he'll be ready to go. He'll be fighting back, and I think he has a big bounce back game. So be a good sender for him because I think he has a tough couple rounds to come. So this will be a good score from him. So there's my 5. Bit of a different mix. I know I'm probably missing out on the likes of, a Zorko, a Whitfield, a Sheezel probably should be in there. My people going Marshall, El Golden. There's just a lot of those. I could have thrown a Noah Anderson in there as well, just given the matchup, but I don't think I want to throw both of them in there. Just not super confident that both of them hit those heights. Traditionally, we've only seen one of them go quite big in those matchup. Like a Sarong went like a straight 100 while Brayshaw at 115. Lockie Neal 130, whereas Dunkley I think only went like a 100 or something like that. So only one of those guys are going to hit a ceiling score. It's just which one is it going to be. And then there's just a few other mediocre guys that I probably wouldn't play where I'm with. So I really like these ones. Nick Newman's probably a bit of a shout. I didn't really consider him in my captains just yet. I don't think he's quite as highly owned just yet. So when he is a bit more highly owned, I will consider him. But for now, I'll just stick to the more popular players. So there is my top 5. Hopefully, I've given you plenty of information to, make your decisions, and hopefully you have a great week and smash your captains. I'll catch you guys next week for the review. Have a good one, and bye.